Preparation for the Bethel raid began immediately after the Hayes-Davion affair was resolved. Justin Ellard spent weeks planning and rehearsing the operation he named Intruder's Communion with the 4th Tau Ceti Rangers. A precise replica of the facility was constructed for the Maskarovka team to perfect their movements, ensuring the raid would be executed quickly and efficiently. The Rangers' task was to pin down the local defense force in open combat, drawing attention away from the infiltration team. After extensive training, Justin finally felt confident in his force and launched the operation. The anticipated garrison was Delta Company of the Davion Light Guards, a unit that had distinguished itself early in the invasion by defeating both Cochrane's Goliaths and the Fremont Cuirassiers. Stationed on Bethel for rest and refit, they were caught off guard by the Capellan strike. Still, the Light Guards reacted swiftly, deploying an interception team to the suspected Capellan landing zone. Only at the last moment did they realize the second dropship was veering toward the research facility. Captain Andrew Redburn attempted to block the Maskarovka team with his lance, but by the time they arrived, the facility had already been stripped and the raiders were preparing to withdraw. A brief battle followed, but Redburn's lance was quickly defeated, allowing Justin's team to make a clean escape. Upon return to Sion, the data recovered from Bethel was immediately analyzed. The Capellans were astonished to discover that the Davions were developing a new form of Myrmir synthetic muscle, 3 times stronger than standard, with no increase in size or weight. Chancellor Maximilian Lau ordered his engineers to reverse engineer the breakthrough and integrate it into Capellan mechs as quickly as possible. He planned to eventually upgrade the entire Confederation arsenal, beginning with Warrior House Imara, the elite defenders stationed on Sion. The Federated Sons, however, pressed their advantage and continued their invasion deeper into Confederation territory, eventually driving into the Sarna commonality. One effect of the assault on Sarna was the destruction of its Comstar HPG facility, which induced the Order to enact an interdiction across its Federated Sons. Without the faster-than-light communications of the Hyperpulse Generator network, many expected the Federated Sons' war machine to grind to a halt, but it did not. The Willie Prince Davion, known by then as the Fox, had already planned a series of Pony Express jumpship circuits to pass orders from New Avalon to units fighting in the field. Though this circuit of hand-carried messages was much slower than HPG, communications never truly ceased. House Lau, which had embraced the interdiction as a means of halting their invasion, suffered continual losses as the Prince's commanders, in the absence of higher orders, attacked as planned. Although Sarna held little military value as the administrative center of its commonality, it was selected as the ideal site for a logistics hub and staging area for future invasion waves. The 5th Certus Fusiliers RCT, supported by 2 mercenary units and 15 conventional regiments, received orders to seize the planet. From the outset, the campaign was plagued with problems. Federated intelligence on Sarna was nearly 6 months out of date, and during the journey, an Invader-class jumpship malfunctioned and exploded, killing its crew. Upon entering the system, General Gordon Hartstone of the 5th Certus Fusiliers made the reckless decision to advance ahead of the main invasion force to avenge Michael Hayes-Davion, arriving 2 days early. Only after landing did his forces discover that the local garrison was none other than an entire Big Mac. The Big Mac utterly crushed the Davion troops, annihilating the 5th Certus Fusiliers. When the supporting conventional forces landed, they found their mech support almost completely destroyed. Of the 20 dropships deployed, barely half survived. But despite this catastrophic opening, the Federated Sons pressed forward. The fighting was brutal, but the Big Mac was eventually forced to withdraw. The battle caused severe damage to Sarna's infrastructure, none more disastrous than the destruction of the local Comstar HPG facility. In retaliation, Comstar imposed a communications interdiction on the entire Federated Sons, cutting them off from faster-than-light transmissions. The Capellan Confederation rejoiced, believing the invasion would grind to a halt. however, Hans Davion had foreseen the possibility of interdiction and had already established a fleet of Pony Express jump ships to hand-deliver orders. The invasion continued without interruption. It later turned out that the destruction of the facility was a false flag operation conducted by Comstar to provide an excuse for interdicting the Federated Suns. This wasn't Comstar's getting in bed with the Capellans, but rather to further their own agenda. They would rather have small, fragmented nations they could influence rather than a big and unified one. But that is a story for another time. The fall of Sarna struck another blow to the Confederation, not for its strategic worth, but for the collapse in morale it caused. Soon after, Maskarovka intelligence reported that several Sarna commonality worlds were considering surrendering directly to the Federated Suns. To many, it seemed inevitable that the Confederation days were numbered, and submission to the Davions was preferable to Merrick domination. In response, Sun Shang proposed an ambitious plan to at least slow the Davion advance. In the Cathil system stood one of the last remaining jump ship yards in the Innisphere. Kang suggested sabotaging its repair facilities so that Davion jump ships would gradually fall into disrepair. Since jump drive technology was scarce, he cautioned against destroying the yard outright, fearing retaliation that might drag both realms back into a technological dark age. Desperate for a reprieve, Chancellor Maximilian Lau approved the mission, assigning one of the last fresh contingents of Death Commandos alongside the 4th Tau Ceti Rangers in a final attempt to halt the invasion. The effort, however, proved futile. After the failure on Cathil, many in the Confederation criticized the Chancellor's decision to squander such precious troops and even more precious transportation assets on such a long-range, high-risk mission. Maximilian Lau's usual answer to criticism was violence, and despite his weakening mental state, this situation was no different. A number of chancellery courts were convened to examine collusion of the Davion enemy, and several nobles were executed for daring to speak out. In hindsight, however, most objective historians recognize that Maximilian had little choice. With half the Confederation's worlds under Federated Suns' control, the Capellan economy had ground to a halt. Every transport hall capable of carrying troops was dragooned into the defensive effort, every manufacturer still capable of production was making war materiel, and workers were conscripted from every other segment of industry to support them. Production of consumer goods stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Literal famines occurred on a dozen of Confederation worlds. The Chancellor's options were to take any chance to slow the invasion or to surrender. And Maximilian Lau was incapable of surrender. Upon arriving in Cathil, the Capellan strike force was immediately engaged by the newly formed 1st Cathil Uchlin's regiment. The Death Commandos were destroyed, while the 4th Tau Ceti Rangers laid down their arms and surrendered. They were later repatriated to the Confederation in exchange for the remaining dropships. The Comstar interdiction, initially seen as a boon for the Capellans, soon proved to be only a minor inconvenience for the Davions, one they had already anticipated. After the failed Cathil operation, however, the interdiction backfired against the Confederation. Because the ban covered the entire Federated Suns, it affected all communications within its borders, regardless of origin. The Capellans thus had no real-time information about the operation's progress. When reports finally reached them, they were deliberate fabrications. News that the 4th Tau Ceti Rangers had successfully captured Morgan Hazak Davion, heir to the Davion throne. This deception set the stage for a daring raid on Sion itself. Maximilian and his court celebrated the supposed victory, preparing to receive Morgan as a prisoner at the Chancellor's private spaceport in the Forbidden City. Morgan was indeed en route to Sion, but not as a captive. He led the raid personally. As the 4th Tau Ceti dropships began their descent, their weapon systems deployed, unleashing devastating fire on the Forbidden City. Warrior House Imara immediately mobilized its battle mechs to defend their Chancellor, meeting them head-on with the very same first Cathil Uflins who had shattered the Capellan strike force at Cathil. But what was the true purpose of this dangerous raid into the heart of the Confederation? Assassinating Maximilian would certainly have aided the Davions, but it was not the goal. The objective was to recover a long-embedded asset, an asset within the Capellan court since before the war began. That asset was Justin Jean Ellard. Justin had always been a Davion agent. His supposed exile and hatred to the Federated Sons had been a carefully crafted deception to embed him within Capellan society. Once elevated into the Maskarovka, he uncovered Mike Hazak Davion's simplicity and passed information to House Davion. He had also fed intelligence that led to the Confederation's string of defeats. Nearly every disaster to befall the Capellans during the Fourth Secession War could be traced back to him. He was the single greatest instrument of their downfall. Within the Forbidden City, Andrew Redburn located Justin. The two exchanged the code phrase marking the completion of his mission: Sic semper tyrannis, thus ever to tyrants. Alongside another Davion operative, Alexei Mallory, and Maximilian's own daughter, Candace Lau, the Uflins secured their prize and began their retreat. Justin rejoined the fight, piloting his Centurion towards the waiting dropships. During the withdrawal, the Uflins crippled several House Imara mechs, exposing their experimental Myanmar muscles. To the Capellan's horror, the systems ignited upon contact with the air. The much vaunted triple-strength Myanmar had been yet another deception engineered by Justin. Their prototype firebursts were unstable and would combust when struck with specialized Davion ordnance carrying reactive gases. With Imara's battle mechs disabled, the Uflins successfully extracted their forces and escaped into space. This raid marked the final major operation of the Capellan Davion War. Soon after, attrition stalled the Davion advance. Hans Davion sued for peace, annexing the Tikhonov and Sarna commonalities. Tikhonov became the Free Tikhonov Republic, while Candace Lau, Duchess of St. Ives, declared her realm independent as the St. Ives Compact, with her as Prime Minister.